All right, today we're jumping into one of the biggest stories there is, our own. We're cracking open the chapter on evolutionary context to trace our hominid lineage, breaking down the huge steps that turned our ancient ancestors into, well, us. So, the big question is, how did we get here? How do we become human? The journey from an ape-like ancestor to a species that writes poetry and flies to the moon wasn't just one giant leap. Nope, it was a whole series of really crucial steps that played out over millions of years. Let's go right back to the beginning. To start our story, we have to imagine the savannas of Africa. This is the continent that was, quite literally, the cradle for all of humanity. And to find our earliest known ancestors, we need to spin the clock back, way back, about 4 million years.
And here we are. This is our starting line, 4 million years ago. This is the moment when the fossil record shows our family tree taking a completely new and revolutionary path. As you can see from this map of the hominid lineage, our story has a few key players. The very first ones on the scene were the Australopithecines. Thanks to fossil evidence, like the incredibly famous Lucy skeleton, we have a pretty amazing picture of what these early folks were like. In a lot of ways, they were still very ape-like. They had ape-like faces, and their brains were really no bigger than a modern chimpanzee's. But they had one revolutionary trait, something that would change the entire course of evolution. And that trait? It was bipedalism, the ability to walk upright on 2 legs. This was a massive evolutionary shift. And what's so critical to remember is that this came before big brains and before stone tools. The simple act of walking upright freed up the hands, and that set the stage for, well, everything that was to come. Okay, so for 2 million years, our ancestors are just walking around. Then the next major leap happens. A totally new character enters our evolutionary story, and this one is defined not just by how they moved, but by what they could make. Let's move our timeline forward to 2 million years ago. This is a really pivotal moment because it's when we see the emergence of our own genus, Homo, our direct ancestral line.
So meet Homo habilis, whose name literally means the handyman. And really the name says it all. Their brain was bigger, it was more complex, and our source material even points to evidence of Broca's area, which is a part of the brain that's essential for speech. Now, this cognitive jump is tied directly to 2 other huge changes. They started making the first stone tools, and they started eating more meat. This created this powerful feedback loop, right? Better tools let them get more meat, and that extra protein and fat fueled an even bigger, more complex brain.
The innovations of Homo habilis were amazing, but they basically set the stage for an even more successful and widespread group to follow. This next hominid didn't just survive in Africa, they started to take on the world. So we're jumping forward again, this time to about 1.6 million years ago. This is the era of Homo erectus, a species that just blew the boundaries of the hominid world wide open. With a brain that was way bigger and a serious knack for adapting to new places, Homo erectus became the first hominid to ever venture out of Africa. As our sources tell us, they spread all across Asia and into Europe. This was a species that was built to explore. Part of what made them so successful was a major tech upgrade, the Australian toolkit. Now, this kit, according to our source material, featured these really cool, symmetrically flaked hand axes. They were way more versatile than the earlier tools. You can think of them as the original Swiss army knives, useful for just about everything. But their single biggest innovation, the one that changed everything, it was controlling fire. Think about it. Fire gave them warmth in cold climates, it protected them from predators, and it gave them a revolutionary new way to cook their food. Cooking makes nutrients way more available, which in turn helped fuel even more brain development. So for over 1 million years, Homo erectus and their descendants were doing great. They thrived. But the final and maybe the most incredible transformation was still to come. And this one wasn't about a bigger body or a sharper tool. It was about a completely new kind of mind. Our timeline now makes its last big jump to just 200,000 years ago. And in the grand scheme of things, that's just a blink of an eye. This is when anatomically modern Homo sapiens, yep, that's us, finally appear on the scene. Now, this is so important to get. The final leap wasn't about brain size. Other archaic humans, like the Neanderthals, already had brains that were just as big as ours. The real difference, as our source material explains, was in the shape and the structure. Just look at the comparison here. The modern human skull is more rounded, with more room up at the front and on the sides. This wasn't just a cosmetic change, it was a fundamental rewiring of the brain for a new kind of thinking. So what did this new brain wiring actually do? Well, it basically unlocked a whole new set of mental superpowers. We're talking about advanced planning, the ability to make complex associations, and the big one, abstract and symbolic thought. This also likely happened around the same time our pharynx evolved, allowing for the full range of sounds you need for complex language. And you can literally see the evidence for this new mind explode into the archaeological record during a period called the Upper Paleolithic. All of a sudden, bam, there's this cultural explosion. Technology gets way more diverse, with specialized tools made from bone and antler, and you see absolute game changers like the bow and arrow show up. But honestly, nothing signals the arrival of the modern human mind quite like this, the birth of art. These incredible cave paintings and engravings weren't just about survival. They were about imagination, ritual, symbolism. For the very first time, we can look back into the past and truly see ourselves reflected in our ancestors' minds. So we've just covered a 4 million-year journey, from walking apes to creative artists. But why does any of this ancient history matter to us right now, today? It matters because every single one of those adaptations we talked about, walking on 2 legs, making a tool, controlling fire, thinking in symbols, they didn't just vanish. They are the foundational layers of the very brain we are using right now. The intellect that evolved to track an animal across the savannah is the same intellect we now use to track subatomic particles. So to wrap up our ascent, it all started with a physical foundation, bipedalism, which freed our hands. That led to a long period of expansion, this feedback loop of bigger brains, better tools, and eventually fire that grew our abilities. And it all culminated in the spark of imagination, a rewired brain that gave birth to art, complex language, and the cultures we all live in. Our evolution brought us to this point. The only real question is, where will this ancient brain take us next?